Monday, January 23rd, 2023. Welcome to the City of Farmers Branch Planning and Zoning Commission study session. I want to thank all the commissioners for their service. Up first, item A1, discuss regular agenda items. And that takes us to item C1, consider approval of the December 12, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission minutes and take appropriate action. Commissioners, any typos, errors in the minutes? All right.
This was the new format, the way it was written out, wasn't it? Was this the first time?
No.
We've been doing it this way for a little bit.
For a little bit? Maybe I don't ever read them.
Summary.
Anyway, it was very detailed.
We
Yeah,
are.
much more detailed, yeah.
Well, it used to be you didn't have answers and questions and all that.
Yeah,
That's all in there
it
now.
was, used to be like much more like verbatim. We have tried to go to a more summary minutes
Right, yeah,
format.
it was good.
All right. Thank you. That takes us to item C2, consider the request from Lapis 49 LLC and Pavo 786 LLC for final plat approval of Kitty Academy at Mercer Crossing, located at the southeast corner of Valley View Lane and Mercer Parkway, and take appropriate action. Commissioners have questions? Who's presenting?
Chris will be presenting that.
Right. Any questions for Chris?
Other than why we're putting a child care center right next to another child care center, but it's allowed by right, so here we go.
A lot of kids.
Kids.
It did seem though they were gonna coordinate from our last discussion, so I think there could be some synergies to be found there.
Open.
Well, one's more school, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little,
Versus daycare.
slightly different, yeah, use there, if I understand correctly. All right, nothing further. All right.
There is one more.
Oh, the public hearing, yes. So discussion of the public hearing, item D1, conduct a public hearing and consider the request to amend Planned Development District Number 75, PD 75, including but not limited to modifying the development standards for signage on an appropriate 2.35 acre property located at 14185 Dallas Parkway, and take appropriate action. Who will we hear from?
Chris will be presenting that
All
one.
right. And I know that we did hear a signage thing before, and it seems as though my understanding, and staff can correct me, that this is something our development partners are really desiring in terms of being able to market the businesses in these buildings.
I believe, Jerry, we're referring to the Interstate Batteries project. Similar, yes, a little bit of difference from a procedural standpoint. That's why we're
Got it.
And this one is, it's called a roof sign, right? But only because it's attached to.
It's on the roof.
It's to attach to something that's on the roof, but it looks like it's a building sign, right? I mean, they look like they're on the top side of the
Screening.
building, but just technically it's a roof sign.
And you had a question?
I was thinking this one, when I looked at it, actually was on the roof.
It is on the roof.
Yeah. This
It is on the roof. So
On the
it
front,
does,
on the-
to your point, it does kind of look like it's a wall sign, but since it's the mechanical screening that this is being located on, that mechanical screen's technically on the roof of the building. So that's why we're considering this a roof sign and not just a wall sign like we normally see.
Thank you for the clarification.
But I didn't think this one was as visible.
It is actually pretty visible from
Is
the
it?
freeway.
From Dallas North Tollway, it's pretty visible. And in my presentation, I'll show an
How tall
image.
is that building? How many?
It's 15 stories, and it's like 225 feet, I
Yeah,
believe, is the overall height.
It's just the picture they had on there maybe was kind of not as visible to me. But anyway, go ahead. You'll have a better picture.
Any other questions, concerns? Have we gotten any responses back? It didn't seem like
We have not.
Okay. All right. That will bring us back to item A2, discussion and direction regarding potential amendments to the landscaping provisions of the comprehensive zoning ordinance. I believe we have Kira.
I think.
Oh, you're muted, Kira.
There we go. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. Good Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Kira McCardle. I'm a consultant to the Planning Department. I am here today to talk to you about some proposed amendments to the landscaping section of the CVO. Just to go over a little bit of what we'll cover today, I'll do a brief background. We'll talk about the why behind the proposed amendment, and then we'll get into the proposed policy direction, which is what we'll be talking about today. So that's sort of the meat of the presentation, and then we'll quickly wrap up with some next steps. So then we'll hopefully have a good amount of time for some questions and feedback and discussion. So in terms of where we are right now and where we've come from, we did begin to review the landscape regulations in 2019. It was directed by the Planning and Zoning Commission and was a part of the city's strategic plan in 2019. The process was put on hold due to COVID-19 and due to staff changes. We did start again in 2022. We've been back to P&Z to council once and to P&Z once. In November, we talked to all of you about some general direction and some analysis that staff had done, really looking at areas where we could improve the current regulations and some areas we might want to look at to make other changes as well. And today what we'll be talking about is really what changes staff is proposing to make. So we're getting a little more into the detail at this stage. So the why behind what we're doing is the city has adopted a fair amount of policy. It is really important that when the city adopts new policy, that we do take a look at some of the regulations that could help to implement that policy. If we aren't making changes sort of at the regulation level, it will be very difficult for a lot of the goals of that policy, especially with regards to landscaping, to be realized. So as I said in the strategic plan, did direct staff to look at the landscaping regulations. In addition, the city has a number of comprehensive plans, including the Central Area Plan and the East Side Plan and the I-35 Corridor Vision Study, which all discuss a need to maintain and enhance landscaping along the streets to really improve that streetscape presence. It was one of the goals of the Planning and Zoning Commission to look at the landscape regulations. The Planning and Zoning Commission at the time this project was started, I know some of the members have changed, had really noted and commented several times that the lack of landscaping in residential areas as properties were redeveloped was something that they wanted to have looked at. And then lastly, stormwater management is something that's always of a concern to the city. So if we have more pervious surfaces within the city, more landscaped areas, it will help with stormwater management, both on a site level and at a city level. And then lastly, there has been a desire to ensure that we're comparable with regional standards within the DFW. So as I said, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but last time I spoke to the commission in November, we did go over an analysis that we had conducted with a number of other cities, looking at their landscape regulations and what sort of standards we saw around the DFW. In short, in a lot of areas, the city does have a lot of room for improvement. For instance, there are no single-family residential landscaping requirements, and our site coverage requirement for non-residential areas is quite low compared to the regional average. So where are we going from here? So when we were with you last time, we did get direction and support from the commission to start to look at some of those areas where the city was lacking. Staff does feel it will be a fairly comprehensive rewrite of the landscape regulations. And the focus will really be on implementing some of the city's policy and finding the best fit for Farmers Branch. So what does that mean? For instance, a lot of the city's comprehensive plans talk about having a nice, attractive streetscape. So one of our proposals that we'll discuss later on is to include in non-residential areas 50% of the landscaping requirement be within the front yard. So if that policy or regulation, is adopted, that will be helping to achieve those policy goals. what we'll be talking about specifically today, there are two main categories I would break things down into: residential requirements, where we'll discuss a tree requirement for residential lots, and a tree credit program. And then non-residential requirements, where we'll talk about lot coverage, parking and landscaping requirements, and landscape design. And then we'll at the end, we'll wrap up by talking a little bit about implementation. So to start off, talking about residential requirements, just to, again, to have a brief review of some of the analysis that we did. Cities do approach things in a varied number of ways, but I would say if I had to sort of summarize the two main ways that cities do discuss or address residential requirements, it's one of two ways. It's either a number of trees per lot or percent coverage of a lot. And you'll also see many cities do require that front yards or backyards, also side yards, have pervious surfaces on them, and that is to maintain stormwater management on the sites. Currently within Farmers Branch, there are no residential landscaping requirements for any R districts. So that's R1 to R2, and those are our single family residential districts. We are proposing to establish requirements based on the zoning for R1 to D2. So D1 and D2 are our duplex residential districts, which allow either a duplex or a single family dwelling to be established on them. Currently, they do fall, the D1 and D2 do fall under the 5% requirement. But for ease of implementation, staff is suggesting that we address R1 to D2 together. What staff is proposing is that based on the zoning and the minimum lot size of the zoning district, we would require a minimum number of trees. One of those trees would need to be located within the front yard setback, thereby helping us achieve a streetscape, an attractive streetscape. And the remainder of the trees could be distributed around the lot as the developer or the lot owner saw fit. In zoning districts, which all of them do require more than one tree, landowners would have the opportunity to substitute any tree after the first one for 2 ornamental trees and 4 shrubs. So this will help to promote a variety of landscape materials on a site. In addition, we would require that the front yard setback have permeable materials on them, either a form of mulch or ground cover or grass. The rear yard would also need to be, we would have some probably looser requirements around having a city-approved landscape material in the back, just to ensure, again, from a stormwater perspective, that no issues are created. So as you can see from the table on this slide, the largest number of trees that we would require in any zoning district is in the R1 district. And that would have that would require a minimum of 9 trees. Now those are 1 acre lots, so we are looking at a very large amount of space. The number of trees required do decrease after that point. I also did want to note, regarding R1 district, is that there are very few R1 lots within the city. And some of them are historical in nature. So there are some lots that are under that 1 acre size. So staff would also propose adding a clause into the regulation where if a lot is under 1 acre in size, they may be able to require fewer trees on the basis of the lot size. You may be wondering how we came up with the numbers.
Oh, yes, Kira?
Yeah?
Marcus, Commissioner Miller has a question, if you want to go back to the slide.
So I just don't, so the jump from 13,000 to 43,000 goes from 3 to 9. And when I look at it, I think, somebody has a 42,000 square foot lot and they have to have 3 trees. Somebody has a 44,000 square feet, they have to have 9. Is it possible, like within R2 to do gradations, like 13 to 23,000 has 4, 23 to 33 has 5, or maybe 5 and 7 or something So that, because there's a fairly large area there, right? And then once you get there, all of a sudden it jumps from 3 to 9. I didn't know if there's any way to
Yeah.
spread that out.
Yeah, that's something that staff can definitely look at. That is something that we did see other cities do. I did see some other cities. The city of Fort Worth, for example, comes to mind. They have a requirement based on the square footage size of the lot. So that's just a different approach. Very similar but different approach, and it does allow you to have sort of that gradation. So we could either change the approach to be based on a certain number of square feet, a certain number of trees per square feet in the lot size, or have a base for each zoning district, and if you are larger than that lot size by a certain number of square feet, you could be required to have other trees. But that is something that staff can look at.
So maybe, Kira, if we can also talk about how that number 9 came.
Yeah.
That would also help.
So I was just going to get to that. So we did find some good sources from the Texas A&M. They do have a tree planting guide, which does outline the number of square feet that's recommended per tree for growing space. So if you do look at this slide, it does show the number of the recommended square footage for different sizes of trees. So for a large canopy tree, they do recommend 180 square feet per tree. So if you look at that for sort of a 1 acre site, 9 trees is using up 1,620 square feet of the site. So there's lots of that site left for them to meet the maximum lot coverage, which is 25% in an R1 lot, and also to leave space for patios and other landscaping, a pool, to use the lot as you would like, but to include some of those trees to help with the aesthetics within the area. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, a couple of spots back here. You use, so I see that some people are saying canopy tree, some people are calling shade tree. Do you have a difference of those, or are those both the same? Or large, what is shade versus canopy versus large? Medium?
Sorry if there is an inconsistency there. A shade tree and a canopy tree would be the same, and I would classify both of them as large.
Large trees, okay.
Yeah.
Do you, in this climate away from the water source, do we typically find more than 9 trees on an acre in just the wild growth area?
I'm not. I can't answer that. I'm not certain on that. We could look or contact the Texas A&M and see if they had any knowledge on that. If you are in an area that's not watered, what the number of trees would be. I can't answer that specifically.
But
I'm wondering
typically
if
we
we're-
have seen large lots which are pretty heavily wooded.
Yeah.
So just in the general DFW metro area, if you have not in the core of the city, larger estate lots, we have seen pretty heavily wooded lots. So when you were referring to away from water, are you saying like from
Well,
natural lakes?
You can find that along the riverbanks and the waterways, but just on flat ground, like say, I don't know, out by Mercer, I mean, was that land, did that land typically have 9 trees per acre before they cleared it?
Well, I think this is looking at planted lots that houses are on. So if you have a house that's on an acre, they're gonna have water source to water. And I think we have something different if it's a commercial lot or whatever. But I'm assuming, how many 1 acre lots, I don't know, maybe over, closer to me, over
So-
Valley View.
So we can pull up the zoning map. So there is a section of the city which is zoned R1, and those are the only area where we have
Yeah.
the 1 acre lot. So it's not too many lots within the city that have R1 zoning or that minimum
Yeah.
lot size.
And those are already canopied quite a bit, those along Webb Chapel.
Yeah,
and
that's what
Valley
we have
View.
seen, like
Yeah,
most, even outside of Farmers Branch, if you have large estate lots,
planted, yeah.
And I think to
And,
your question, there
As
are,
the commissioner mentioned, and any of the residential lots would be required to have a water source for outside watering.
Yes.
I'm wondering if we're not trying to force people to plant more trees than would be there naturally in some areas. That's all.
Yeah, but this is, again, in terms of the city's goals, it is aiming to increase the tree cover within the city. So adding some landscaping requirement does help to meet those goals. Having a tree within the front yard, again, that requirement does help with the streetscape and with walkability within the city. So in establishing a residential requirement, that is what the city is trying to meet.
Also, I want to make sure that we don't force 2 trees on, because on some of this verbiage here, we say after 1 canopy tree, each additional canopy tree will be substituted or can be substituted for 2 ornamentals.
and they don't have to be in the front yard.
Okay. Thank you. 4 shrubs.
Yeah, they can be throughout the lot
Okay.
at
Thanks
that
for looking
point.
out for me, Burl.
Okay,
You're welcome.
okay. Any other questions? Okay, I'll go on to the next slide, but let me know if there are any other questions. So with this, we are proposing to introduce a tree credit program within the residential districts from R1 to D2. And so what we are proposing to do is if an existing lot, this would come into play if an existing lot is redeveloped or if a new residential lot is established. And they are required to meet the minimum tree requirement. If they have existing trees on the lot that they do retain during construction, and if post-construction they're in healthy, good condition, they are able to use those existing trees towards that tree requirement. So that's really trying to maintain existing trees and trying to maintain some existing mature trees so that tree canopy is still there. The number of trees the tree credit that the residential lot would get would be based on the caliper size of the tree. So for instance, within an R1 lot, if you had a requirement for 9 trees, and you had one very, mature tree that was 25 caliper inches in size, and you retain that tree through construction, your requirement would be reduced to 5 trees. It doesn't have to all be with 1 tree. If you have those caliper inches, as long as they're between 3 to 6 inches in size, you can meet that requirement with several trees as well. Sorry. So now to move on to the non-residential site coverage requirements, and I just want to make a quick point of clarification here that non-residential does include multifamily dwellings. They often in landscaping requirements they are sort of lumped in together with the non-residential site coverage, non-residential regulation. Sorry. And again, here throughout the region, we did really see 2 main ways of approaching non-residential site coverage requirements in the DFW. The first is just to have a flat rate for all non-residential zoning districts. And the second was to break up the rate, the required site coverage requirement based on zoning district or zoning type. So typically, I would say that you would see industrial sites requiring a little bit less site coverage than non-industrial sites, sort of at a higher rate of site coverage. What staff is proposing for non-residential site coverage for Farmers Branch is 20% of the entire lot be landscaped. However, we are proposing that any pervious surfaces used in landscaping can count towards this requirement as well. We are proposing a landscape requirement for parking lots, surface parking lots, and that would count towards that as well. This is an increase from what we currently do have. Right now, our requirement is 5% of the entire lot area not covered by buildings. But as I did say, that this requirement that we currently have was within the region, really much lower than any other properties that, any other, regulations that we did review. In addition, we would, the staff is proposing that we would require 50% of the landscaping be located in the front yard setback. And again, that is to really help with the appearance along the streetscape. Also help with walkability in certain areas of the city, helping to shade the sidewalks and things of that nature. For parking lot landscaping, we currently have a tiny bit of regulation related to it, but not very much. When a parking lot is visible from the street, we do require that there is some landscaping provided. However, we don't quantify what the city would require. Moving forward, what staff is proposing is that we require 10% of the interior of any parking lot be landscaped, and that we have one canopy tree for each 10 parking space and one landscape island for each 10 parking spaces. So this really just helps to break up the parking lot and parking lot area, and also provide some shade, for cars and for pedestrians in the area. Staff does always recommend that parking lots are located behind a building, away from view of the public street. However, where parking areas may be located adjacent to the street, staff would propose that we require that a hedge be put in place, and as well as evergreen trees, just to screen the area from view. We would have write in an exception to these regulations, where if the lot is used for warehousing or manufacturing type uses, the city the requirement for landscaping within the parking area be waived. The city does have a lot of warehousing and light industrial uses, which are very important to the city, and we want to make sure that we don't hamper the movement of trucks or vehicles within their lots. Sustainable landscape design. Staff is proposing that if a landscape design for a non-residential lot is presented that does meet the goals of the landscaping provision and just does show improved stormwater management, for the site. Also, if they include at least 2 enhancements in the form of permeable pavers, bioswales, or retention of existing trees, that a lot can be eligible for up to a 5% reduction in the site coverage requirement. So this would allow a lot to go from 20% site coverage to 15% site coverage requirement if the developer or lot owner doesn't incorporate some sustainable design principles.
Kira, what's a bioswale?
It's a natural area that's vegetated, and it would collect stormwater and allow it to percolate slowly into the ground. And also it does provide some cleaning for stormwater as the water does percolate through. So it's used a lot in stormwater management. So this the top image here, this would likely act as a bioswale. So it's in the gravel area. Any stormwater that is or runoff that is produced from a storm event or a rain event would percolate through that area at a slower rate than an area that is not treated in this way, and it would produce less runoff to go into the sewers.
Is this the time to ask if a xeriscape is included in that sustainable landscape design?
It could be. It definitely could be. That's something that we could add as one of the enhancements. We will just touch on it briefly later on. We will be reviewing the required the landscape species list that the city does use as a part of this process, and we would be ensuring that we are recommending plants that are drought resistant and appropriate for the climate.
Okay, so we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Okay.
And here we are. So other additions and updates, I'll just go over this slide quickly so we still have time for some discussion. But in terms of irrigation and maintenance and replacement, there is currently regulation within the CZO related to these two items. However, it's very broad. In the case of irrigation, it's a bit outdated. I think it requires that there be a water source within 100 meters of all plant materials. So we'd like to update and clarify these sections within the landscape regulations, just to ensure that they're current and they're clear, and make them much easier for staff to implement and for users to understand what the city is looking for. In terms of plant materials, so we'll be doing revisions on plant materials. And we expect our main sources will be the American Standard for Nursery Stock. So they talk about material requirements, that we ensure that materials we're using, such as grass seed, are clean and in good condition. And then for plant species, the Texas A&M has some really good sources on plant species that are really appropriate for use within the local context. One last item to discuss is non-conforming properties. If revised landscape regulations are approved by City Council, it will mean that many of the lots may be non-conforming. So a big question is how we will, our staff will deal with this once it does occur. By no means are we going to be going around to every lot and asking them to come into full conformance right away. What would happen and what the non-conforming regulations will do is set some standards for when a property would need to come into conformance. For a residential property, staff would not require them to come into conformance unless they were being redeveloped. So if the current structure was being demolished and a new structure was being put up, or if there was a new residential lot. There isn't a lot of space for that within the city, but where new lots are established, they would need to be conforming. In terms of non-residential uses, we are proposing to make a few amendments to the existing non-conforming provisions, just to make the city's expectations a little bit more clear. So what we would be looking for from non-residential properties is if a site is redeveloped, it would need to be in conformance. In addition, if a use is abandoned or the structure is damaged by more than 50%, then the entire site would need to be in conformance with the landscape regulations and other applicable regulations. And then we would like to also tie the landscape regulations to the expansion of the structure. And what we've seen other cities do is they do use a scale. So if the structure is expanded by up to 20%, then they need to meet at least 20% of the landscaping requirement. If the structure is expanded between 20 and 50%, then normally what we've seen is the lot needs to meet at least 50% of the landscaping provisions. Or if the structure is expanded by more than 50%, then it needs to really come into full conformance with the landscaping provisions. So that would just ensure any change on existing sites will likely be incremental. But over time, sites would slowly come into conformance. So in terms of next steps, we will be taking this information to council for feedback. Once we get feedback from yourselves and from council, we will be drafting the revised landscape regulations. Once we have that completed, we'll come back to P&Z and council with those regulations for further discussion. And once we have a draft that both groups seem to be happy with, we will start the formal adoption and public hearing process. So with that, that's the end of my presentation, and I am open for questions and discussion. Thank you.
Commissioners, anyone have questions for Kira? Thank you, Kira, for your thorough work.
Yes, I do.
All right.
So when we say that, if they're gonna be redeveloped or expanded, that's when they could be brought into conformance. But I know that within Farmers Branch right now, and even since we have been on council and on this commission, and okayed planting, things for buildings, commercial buildings, gas stations, things like that. Many of the shrubs have died along these trees, and they have not been replaced. The only one I know of is the one at Valley View and Josie, and that was because Hugh Pender went there after attending one of these meetings and asked them to redo it. So what can we do for those that are out of compliance right now with dead shrubs all over in front of their places if someone's not asking them? And then, is there any way that we can add to this? And I know that we have over here the Texas Tree Planting Guide, which is not for our county, by the way, it's for Williamson County. So I think we ought to have a Dallas County one. Are we handing these, is this what we're gonna include and hand out, do you know?
For the ordinance itself?
We need a Dallas one, not Williamson County.
Right, of course.
Okay.
So what we plan to do is at least have some of those graphics that are easy to follow as part of the ordinance, either as an appendix or within the text itself. That way, rather than trying to write up everything in a jargonous fashion, it's easy to follow, easy to understand, and definitely the tree list as recommended for this county.
Okay, so because there's trees on this other one that are not recommended for this county. Okay, and then the next thing, is there any way we can put in there, thou shalt not top a crepe myrtle tree? Thou shalt not top a crepe myrtle tree. People cut them
well,
off
you're-
and they're
you're-
just sticks there in the winter. Yeah, it's horrible, horrible.
Murder.
Crepe murder. And so I would like to see that put in the ordinance of Farmers
We'll
Branch.
make it a crime. Crepe
Okay, a
murder.
crime.
A classy
Crepe
misdemeanor
murder.
to cut the
So,
top off a crepe
That's
murder.
what it's called. But I would like to see that in writing, that is what we require, that what we're asking for. And then what could we do about places that are already out of compliance with dead bushes all over?
Yeah, so you're correct, and that's one of the areas that we would like to revise, and that would fall under the maintenance and replacement section. So we do currently have some regulation related to that. I can read it to you. Staff has always found it very, very vague. It does read, all landscaping shall be maintained in a living and growing condition. Any landscaping that is removed must be replaced with the same or comparable species and caliber plant as when it was originally installed. When we reviewed other cities' ordinances, they all do deal with this. I think what ours needs to be fleshed out a little bit more and to be a little bit more specific in terms of what we replace, what we require. And that's what staff is proposing to do, that we do require that should a tree die, whether it be, taken out without any permission, or it die or be diseased, that becomes a code enforcement issue, and the landowner should be required to replace it.
So do we know that code enforcement's looking at
That's a different form of
that?
non-conformance than a site having 5% of its lot area outside of structures, landscaping, and they're maintaining it and everything is healthy. Those sites we wouldn't touch. However, if there's a site that's 5% landscaped and they've let 4 trees die,
Maybe if you go to the
then
podium
the
and
city
click
does
the unmute
need
button.
to step in, or we would try and write the regulations in a way that it's clear that the city does have the ability to go and ask them to replace the trees
Okay.
that have died.
I recommend we add
Kira,
that.
can you hear us?
No, I don't think she can.
Can you hear us?
Now she
Hello?
can.
Can you hear us now?
Oh.
Yeah, you
Okay.
cut out for a second.
We were muted for about 5 minutes. We just let you talk.
Okay.
So is that something to get code enforcement to look at and and tell the people these are dead, you need to replace? Is that something we need to add to this or somewhere in there? And to get, so for maintenance and replacement, I think we should have an absolute statement that says, thou shalt not top a crepe myrtle tree.
Well, not just crepe myrtle, for any naturally large tree, it's, I mean, you have seen along 35, they do it not just to crepe myrtle, to every
Yeah, but
large
that,
tree.
I mean,
You're gonna find massive pushback, because there are people, and I agree with you, Linda, with crepe myrtles, but there are people that they want that new growth to get the blooms lower to, I mean.
I can tell you why that doesn't happen. So
Well,
it kills
I'm
the
not-
tree early, and they don't bloom but about 6 weeks later. I mean,
I mean,
if
I'm
we
not-
write it down, we don't have to maybe, okay, let them go out. But I would like it added.
Because you have people that want to groom bushes, and I know that a crepe myrtle is a tree and not a bush. And
They can
I'm not,
groom the
I'm
bottom,
just
yeah.
playing devil's advocate
Yeah.
here. I'm not saying that.
They can clean up the bottom.
But you have people that craft, ornamental trees into bowls, and I mean, so if you're
Another bad thing.
Well,
So-
I mean, I'm not doing that on my yard.
I
either.
understand. I
But-
would still like it written in. I mean, it is a horticultural practice that is wrong. And across the country, they say, do not do it. Let's lead the way.
Yeah, we can definitely put that in the maintenance sections, and I agree with you that if the statement already says if you have a large mature canopy tree, large tree, or a medium-sized tree, you just have to maintain it in a naturally living, growing condition and not artificially prune it to the
Make shapes.
task of it.
To look like a Mickey Mouse shape. No, I truly would like to say crepe myrtle. Do not top a crepe myrtle tree, but we'll work on that. I can see I'm getting pushback here.
I mean, I'm not. Again,
But unless we
I
lead the
agree
way,
with
guys,
you
it's
in terms of
and
an
it's done
ordinance.
usually by your maintenance people. It's not done by the owner. Well, no, many houses are, but they've got maintenance people come in and cut it down. I had my maintenance guy the other day say, "You want me to top your trees?" And I said, 22. I'll shoot you.
Sure, sure. I have questions as it pertains to what you talked about with like code enforcement. So, and I know like on thoroughfares, it's very easy to identify when bushes have died and they need to be replaced. But when you're talking about like cul-de-sacs and neighborhoods, like, so we're asking our neighbors to report, or we're relying on code enforcement to
Code
have
enforcement, I
like
think.
very clear memories of what it looked like before, say they died and they quickly pulled them out. And so like, how do you really
You could
preserve
always
the record?
go back on aerial data to see how
What it
the,
looked
like
like
we had
before.
today,
Is that significantly more labor intensive than what the intent is? I mean, I don't know.
not
like-
really, pulling up historical aerials is not really labor intensive.
Code enforcement drone, you haven't seen it going down your street?
I mean, when our bushes died, we pulled them out very quickly, and we then replaced
need
them
one.
also fairly quickly.
Don't you have one
but,
for cops?
I just wonder, I mean, because I do see a lot of dead landscaping from all the way back to February of 2021 that hasn't been replaced, and so I just
But I'm
wonder.
talking about, the stores or the
The commercial
service
properties.
stations and.
Well, I had a question about that. At one point, you differentiated between retail and warehousing in the parking landscaping. Is there any other differentiation? Because I would say typically the retail areas would be the ones that you'd be more concerned with walkability and shade. The warehousing areas, you don't really care, nobody's gonna walk through that. Manufacturing areas, warehousing areas.
No.
Could there be a differentiation in the requirements there?
No, I would propose that unless it's in a warehousing area, like I said, if it's used for loading and unloading, an area where there's truck traffic, I would propose that the requirement stays the same. Landscaping within parking areas is beneficial for a number of reasons. There's sun damage to cars. In the heat that comes off of a parking lot, it contributes to the urban heat island, and general canopy cover is beneficial for the area. In addition, some of that greenery again does help with stormwater management on the site. So there are a number of, you're right that a retail use may see more traffic within its parking lot, but staff would propose or say that it's still of value within an industrial area where you may just have staff or fewer people coming in and out.
I can understand that that's the reason why we're going to a 20% landscaping area in the non-residential area. So that's a good approach to the heat island and the shade issue. I was wondering if you would anticipate any pushback from developers who may or may not be used to a 20% landscaping requirement.
Before you answer that, I want to chime into that because I'm not a fan of that 20%. I'm not a developer.
How do we
but-
derive the 20%?
So here's my issue with 20%. Is that really what we guys are putting here, 20% of the
That's what we
entire
are
lot?
proposing, but that's what we need your feedback
So-
on.
So essentially by doing that, we're artificially lowering the potential tax value of whatever new square footage is gonna be put in there, like by just telling people that you have to put 20%. So you have a 2-acre lot, you're limiting someone by 18,000 square feet or so of building square footage that would be increasable asset in terms of tax value for the city versus just having nice landscaping.
I'm curious, though, to what extent some of that landscaping would be in the setback areas anyway that would not be developable.
10-foot setbacks is what we have on the multifamilies, right? So if you have 10-foot setback regarding the perimeter of the lot, I mean, that's not going to get you 17,000 square feet.
Is it 20% of the lot or 20% of
it's
what's left
20%
after
of
the
the lot.
building? Of the
So-
whole lot, independent of the building, including?
Your maximum lot coverage, based on the zoning district, that should be your maximum, how much you can build.
Well, we're talking
And I-
about just multifamily, like a multifamily or an industrial building, right? Non-residential. is what-
So I guess from a number standpoint, what I'm trying to determine, and Kira, we probably need to have that calculation as discussed, which is if, say, for 100-acre lot, if your maximum lot coverage is 50%, you're only allowed to build on that 50% of the lot. And then you go vertical, then of course your footprint is getting smaller. So are we really prohibiting the lot owner to build, because he anyway cannot build on 100% of the lot?
So, okay, you just gave a scenario for 100 acres. So let's go to a more
Just-
realistic scenario, like a 2-acre development.
Well, if you, so
Right
I've,
now.
I've done some of those calculations, and if you do have a 1-acre site and you have a 50% lot coverage, so 1-acre site is
That's not what we have for
43,000 square
multifamily.
feet.
We don't have a 50% coverage on a 1-acre lot for like a multifamily. That wouldn't make any sense.
So what
Oh,
would be the
I
lot
was looking-
coverage?
I don't think that's, is that really what our policy is right now, 50%? Is I'm pretty sure we have multifamilies that have more than that. In
So
terms
that's
of
the other
coverage,
thing.
including the parking lot too. I'm not saying just the building itself.
So that would be another question is, are we looking to, for the whole city when it redevelops or develops, to cover every square inch of the lot? Because lot coverage also comes from that standpoint, that how much of it you want to retain as green and permeable, how much you want to add to that stormwater runoff,
So
and
that
make
lot-
the drainage condition even worse.
The lot right by the Starbucks, that was roughly an acre.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
mean
Yeah.
Chipotle
Yeah.
Starbucks?
The-
Chipotle Starbucks, yeah, that,
Yeah.
the project we just saw.
Nietzsche or whatever that apartment was the other day that we saw last
They
meeting, right?
cleared the lot,
Or the-
yeah. It's just north, it's north on the
Talking about
access road.
Roars at Luna?
Oh, it's
just
north of
north of
Valley
Starbucks.
View and the
Jet Street,
access
the
road.
Jet Street apartment we just looked at. That would be a good example. There's no way that we held them to that 20% requirement.
That's because all of these rezonings, I mean, PD 86, of course, is a different zoning altogether. But most of the base zoning district would have a lot coverage requirement, unless you're doing a special PD zoning for multifamily, which has been happening for
Okay.
most of the new projects.
Yeah, this wouldn't touch PDs.
Okay, there we go. That's the answer I wanted to hear. Won't touch
Yeah.
PDs.
This is only CZO.
Okay. Then never mind. I digress. That's all you had to
It's
say.
an important point, though.
But it is a,
Yeah.
yeah.
Conversation, yeah.
Can I get into a couple other things that I didn't see much about? One of the cities had an artificial, was it Addison, had artificial turf. Is that as a replacement of natural growth, grass, ground cover? And what are the pros and cons of that, and can we incorporate that into ours?
It's permeable.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
permeable.
Yeah, we could
Yeah,
look
coverage.
at that. I mean, it's a pilot program. It is what it seemed to me that they're running within a townhouse area. I think it was like I said, I think it really was a pilot program. We need to reach out to them to see if it was successful or not. I know that there were provisions built into it that if they were determining that if it wasn't successful, the landowners would need to pull the turf out and put in grass at their own cost. So we can definitely follow up with the city of Addison and see how that's going and look at and see if it could be an option for Farmers Branch.
But I thought we said in that grass or permeable covering such as ground covering or whatever, which artificial turf is, there's ground underneath it and it has holes in it and water does penetrate artificial turf.
Well, they also have to treat the base with sand. Because another problem with the soil type in this region is because it's so hard clay soil. That's why most of the permeable paving is very difficult to keep it running successfully from a stormwater drainage standpoint, because you have to first excavate almost to like additional 4 feet or so, and then treat that soil with more like sand or other type of soil material. That way, over years, it still percolates water through. Otherwise, if you just put the turf after 2 years or so, and this is what we have heard from Public Works, if you don't treat the base, it just packs up the soil and then
Right,
water
but I
just
think
runs
that
off.
most companies do that, do they not? They excavate.
It
they
just,
put-
yeah, they are supposed to, it's just expensive.
Well, they,
And also for a residential standpoint, then it
Well, that would
becomes
be the
even more
requirement to have it.
expensive.
Yeah, but it is
the
permeable.
company I talked to about putting that in at my house went down about 4 to 6 inches, I think,
Yeah.
with the sand and gravel layers and that kind of thing.
I have
That
it.
seemed adequate. I don't know about, you know, if a wide area coverage would need a 4-foot excavation or what. The other thing I was wondering about is the sprinkler, requirement for sprinkler systems. What would you think would be the pros and cons of either requiring or strongly urging a drip line system instead of sprinklers? Because it would seem to me like that's so much better in terms of sustainability. And if you could give, especially, you know, commercial zones an incentive to install that, that would, seems like that would really take care of some water issues.
Rats eat those.
But drip line systems are only for individual plants.
Yeah, those
You
are for
drip
plant
a tree,
base,
or you
not
drip
for your
whatever.
grass.
That's not for a landscape. That's not for a yard.
Well, no, but in the parking lot and around some of these buildings, which we're only talking about narrow strips of land around a warehouse or something, I mean, it seems like it would work there. And I don't know that much about it, but it seems like in a parking lot where you'd have trees and grass in a strip, then you could have lines directly from the water source to there.
I think we rely on the, Kira, if I may answer
Yeah, go
one thing
ahead.
real quick, is for all these irrigation requirements, as we are not the experts of how irrigation lines should be designed, what we say in our code is irrigation is required, whether it should be fitted with rain sensors and freeze sensors and drip irrigation as applicable, and then we rely at the permit level for a certified either plumber or irrigation specialist to draft those plans and give those to us where it makes most sense. So rather than getting into too much of the design details of an irrigation system, I'll rely on the experts who are certifying those plans when they give those in the permit package.
Is there a way to sort of build the recognition that the drip system is much better than the spray in the air system when we're redoing these requirements?
Well,
So
you have
she
you have a
has written
requirement though,
it.
right? Yeah, recommend that as a, to install something that doesn't put water on the
Yeah,
pavement.
and
So
Kira
however you can
actually-
accomplish that, right?
Even wrote it in the staff report that regulations will include requirements around rain and freeze sensors and sprinkler layout that will reduce water waste. So that's how we will kind of do
If you can
the,
do it without sprinklers, that's even less water waste. 'Cause a drip system isn't a sprinkler.
Drip system will not water a yard, will not water the lawn in a consistent manner. You'd have
has to
dry, 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 dry. You'd have to run it all day in order for it to completely saturate.
So you're saying there's no use for a drip system anywhere?
no, it's a combination of
For your yard-
both.
For the grass, for the turf is what I'm talking about, turf.
Okay, well,
I'm
I'm
saying
talking
for a
about where
flower
it
bed.
makes sense to use.
Yes, absolutely. So it would
would
be
be
a
design.
combination,
Could we?
depending on your landscape design.
Yeah, and could we, I mean, right now, we say nothing about it in there. Maybe if we mentioned a drip system as being highly encouraged by developers, something, anyway, just mention it.
I guess, is it, because I think you mentioned there about it being not spraying onto pavement. Is that, would they be out of compliance? Like if they installed something and if it were spraying and getting in, all in the parking lot, would that be a compliance thing? Would you be able to go back and tell them this is not?
At the end of the day, like, of course, I'm not dealing with commercial properties as a homeowner. It would kind of be up to the homeowner also, as well as the property owner, because you are paying for that water. If your sprinkler system is watering the pavement, but you are still paying for the water. It's very difficult for code officers or for anyone to really be keeping a track on, okay, is the water really going to the grass? It would make sense for you and me.
Because it happens like at dusk or,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. The
dawn,
hours
right?
are usually also odd, but
But in designing your system, when they design a system for your yard, let's say, or for a small area, it's just the size of the head is reduced and all of those things, and it may almost be a drip. It's just sometimes a very small, and they direct it. It goes, you know, it can go this way. A spray can go this way, or it can go this way, or so the designer of the plan will know
yes.
what is the best and most efficient way. And I think if they would put in a drip system, then that was fine. But a drip system is usually used for individual plants.
Yeah, so for example,
good for
like our
trees.
front yard, all the planter beds as well as the trees, we have the drip irrigation, but the lawn would be the sprinkler system.
Well, I thought most of the things we were changing here were in the ordinance for the commercial area, the commercial zones. And that's what I'm thinking it would do the most good. I'm sort of thinking just about that. I'm not trying to tell people how to sprinkle their yard. I'm trying to say if we're gonna build new ordinances for the landscaping around commercial zones where we increase it from 5% to 20%, let's put some more sustainability in there with allowances for artificial turf, for xeriscape, for drip line systems, things that make sense, especially in areas that are not expected to be groomed like people's homes.
I think also what I hear you saying in that, in terms of sustainability, is maybe there's a way we can be explicit that our goal is around water conservation and sustainability, because, to your point, we're not the experts in what works best, nor do we know what future technologies may bring, right? There could be some new, I don't know what that would be because I'm not innovating in that space. But I think language that explicitly defines the goals and then has some suggestions of how those goals could be achieved, I think would be inclusive enough to cover what I hear are the concerns
Everybody, yeah,
across.
yeah.
Yeah, I just want to point out
Yeah,
that it says in here, sprinkler layout design to minimize spray on sidewalks, neighboring property, adjacent buildings. So however it needs to do that, you've stated we don't want to waste water.
Resignations effective at the end of the meeting, they don't care.
You don't get to reside.
You
Any
can't
other
quit.
question, feedback? I know Commissioner Zavala was concerned about the 20% and purely for also multifamily, but just for any non-commercial project, is the commission on board with raising the requirement from 5% to 20%? One thing off the hand I can mention is 5% is really, really the lowest requirement, what we have seen industry-wide.
It does seem to be consistent with others in the region in terms of what they're looking at.
It was on the higher end,
On the higher end,
so.
but consistent also with our claim to be a city within a park.
And also additionally, we are looking at the tree preservation ordinance, so it kind of goes hand in hand. Besides preserving your existing tree, tree canopy, you're also trying to increase natural vegetation or natural canopy within the city.
Yeah, I feel like the way that we've set up some of those sort of credits to help reduce some of the percentage, I wonder if that would ease your mind on the 20%, because essentially that can reduce it to 15. Is there a space there where there are additional features that would meet the goals? Because I think what I'm looking at this, what I'm seeing is an attention to the stormwater management, which I know, especially given the number of tributaries and areas, tends to be a huge issue, not only in the flooding and that sort of thing, but even in the particulate matter that ends up in those waterways and ends up being fish kills. So I think that's what I hear, is that we want that filtration, we want the stormwater management on site, as opposed to the effort to quickly move the water away from the site and channel it into ways that then create problems for our infrastructure, et cetera.
Yeah, so adding to what Chair really is saying, for all the sustainable practices that we are going to recommend, if they choose to do 2 or more of those sustainable design ideas in their landscape plan, then they will receive the credit of 5%, which would reduce effectively the percentage to 15.
So how did you come to 20%? I mean, because I looked at the ranges there from 5 to 30. Did you take an average or something, or do any other calculation?
I would say.
Supposed to say 15 or 10?
I would say that we wanted to stay on the higher end of the spectrum.
Okay.
Can you just give me an example of like a commercial property or some case that's come before us that would fall under this 20% guideline? Just something so I can just kind of picture. Can you think of
Where
anything?
they have proposed about 20%?
No, not when they have, just like someone came here with a development prior to us having any kind of landscaping ordinance. What was that development and how did it look like in terms of?
Multifamily or
That was
commercial?
Well, any commercial.
Yeah, that was
Just
under
commercial.
CZO.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm asking, just so I can
Yeah, just
understand
under
the
CZO.
the projects that would be developed.
I think almost everything we've seen is PD, right?
But then also, most of the commercial PDs, other than multifamily, the new ones, they also have followed the base zoning of light industrial. So, because not all the PDs have landscaping requirements. There are some that do very extensively, like PD 99 or 100 or 88. But not all the PDs have landscaping requirements, and on those, they do follow the base zoning requirements and whatever CZO requires for that base zoning. I don't remember on top of my head, Kira, but the picture you had for the Synergy office warehouse on one of your slides, can you go back to that? That's PD 77.
Which one's
Do
the
you
station
remember
PD?
if PD 77 had its own landscaping requirement?
That wasn't what she named, she didn't name that one, so that would
I
fall
don't
under this
remember.
criteria.
But this site, I'm trying to remember, I have used this image before and it far
That's the
exceeded the
Synergy
landscaping
site,
requirements.
which
I
has
think it was
pretty
about
extensive
20% landscaped. But that might be outside of the structure as well.
So you just listed a few PDs that had specific landscaping, but then you didn't list like the station.
The others that didn't. Oh,
So the
sorry.
station's 80, what?
PD 86.
86?
So PD
86.
86, in terms of landscaping, it does not have a minimum area percentage, if I'm speaking correctly. And I'm looking at my last expert who reviewed the project. But I do know that they do have specific tree buffer requirement or landscape buffer requirements along, say, I-35, and tree spacing requirements along street frontages. Also, there are different ways, the 15% per site, that's offhand. They are supposed to meet the 15% contiguous open space. Now, they
Open space
define open
requirement, there you
space
go.
more
So it's
loosely because their open space is a combination of, it can be a courtyard or a landscape space or
Would a
swimming
courtyard,
pool.
would a courtyard count as landscape?
For that particular PD, yes. Because
Yeah.
the courtyard can be a combination of hardscape and landscape.
PD 86 is a little bit different due to the form of development that it contemplates. And a lot of the other, like we said, PDs don't necessarily the CZO requirements don't necessarily apply to them. A lot of the regulations that we did review, well, a few of them at least did call out certain areas that were sort of the more urban form within their cities and specifically noted that those areas weren't subject to the requirement. So that's something that we can look at within a certain area. And I thought of that for specifically the PD 86 area because it's really a different form of development than we see through a lot of the city.
So that would be the closest example in terms of requiring 15% open area contiguous.
But if the PD, by having that, or if any future PD ascribed a landscape requirement, that would supersede the CZO if it was passed as such.
Yeah.
Gets back to my question, that, would you expect to have pushback from commercial developers that are asking, that are looking at? No,
Oh, me?
You spoke up.
Oh, yes. I thought
Do
we
you
were gonna-
expect pushback from commercial developers?
Maybe.
20%?
Maybe, but I'm trying to again understand like the areas
would
that
it
we're
look
talking about.
like?
What are we talking about? This right here, okay. Not really worried about it. I'm thinking about the 35 corridor where we just did that vision study and we just went through and we just laid out what we want all that to be. How would that be impacted? That's what I'm trying to think. And if we're restricting or we're requiring 20%, I mean, that's a good chunk of
But we
real
also
estate.
have to think, like even right now, without this landscape amendment, most of the properties that have the freeway frontage along 35 and our LI base zoning have a 30-foot landscaped front yard requirement
Yeah,
for
that's what's
all the properties along 35. Because that, I believe, has been a stated objective of the city for a long time, even before the vision study. That's our main corridor, main entryway. You want to beautify that corridor. What's the best way to beautify a corridor rather than landscaping, like plant
It
trees?
just has a requirement that nobody's ever adhered to, right? Because it doesn't look like that.
But
I'm
It
not,
wasn't there before.
Yeah, it's
it's a new requirement for anyone that decides to do new development, right?
right. Yes,
Yeah.
but the 30-foot has been, I guess, at least since this current zoning ordinance has been in practice, that front yard unobstructed landscape.
So let me ask another question, just so again, so we've got the volleyball center that we're gonna be building, the city facility, right? You got that facility, and then next to it, you're gonna have potentially a multifamily facility that would be under PD 86. Would the 20% apply to that? It would
Because
not.
they are still within the station area plan
Yeah.
development
But
zoning.
you just said that PD 86 didn't have a landscaping requirement.
It does have, well, the 15% contiguous open space requirement, that
Would
is within.
supersede the.
Yes, so that
landscape.
would still apply, the 15%.
Well, I didn't like the 15% when we did it, you remember that? Okay. I don't know, 20% just seems high.
I know you want me to forget the 15%. I'm like hanging on to it.
I guess this time I'm not the bad guy, right?
I think, Gio, what I see in this policy personally is a commitment to the city within a park that sets a base goal for the CZO with the flexibility of plan development to permit the types of developments that are still consistent with that and allow us to the flexibility for those developments. That's what I see personally when I look at it.
I like what you're saying, I just don't know if I don't know, just 20% still seems like a high number.
Also, I think the other way of looking at it is, do we really, like, ask that difficult question, do we really want to see, if there were a greenfield site or a redevelopment, do we really want to see 100% or almost like 90%, 95% of that site covered with concrete or pavement?
No, of course we don't, but I also don't like telling people that we absolutely have to do this, or having, I don't know, I feel like we need to have some flexibility there.
Is there a way to, Sharipa, look at these mitigation efforts that still meet the stormwater? Because my concern is the stormwater, quite honestly, given that those mitigation efforts and innovations around stormwater could produce a slightly larger percent reduction.
I thought we were making developers
I mean,
start
larger
doing.
than a 5%.
Rather
Larger than
5%.
5%.
Can I throw out something that I know absolutely nothing about, but might apply to that, is I don't know what the city requirements are for retail or other commercial zoning for parking requirements, how many parking spaces this particular operation has to have. If we shrank that, there would be more room for landscaping. Not only that, it would sort of roll into this idea about encouraging fewer cars.
Yeah, we actually did that in 2020. So we reduced all the parking requirements to half of what they were before.
right?
Yes. And we also introduced the sustainable parking lot design ideas. So even on top of that reduction, we said if any applicant wants to propose alternate parking plan with 2 or more of the sustainable, like the rain gardens and all those permeable paving of 30% or more of the area of the parking lot, they can get more credit.
Oh, good, so that's already been done, all right.
Yes. But we want to incorporate those in the landscaping as well. But that is if you all are open to that, we can look into a tiered system where we can probably provide more or suggest more credit.
Because I think that would achieve both goals. The stormwater reduction sustainability goals and more flexibility on development footprint. Though I don't see it actually limiting the developer footprint personally, even at the 20%. That is my personal view of it, given again, the percentage you'll get from setback requirements and then what they would naturally want in terms of beautification, et cetera.
In addition, just to add in, and we did go over this, but some of those areas that are hard surfaces on the lot do count, as long as they're pervious. So if you have a pervious parking, or if you use a pervious material for your walkway, those, and also the landscaping that we are requesting within the parking lot, those do count towards the 20%.
Correct.
Yeah. It's a good thing,
And if I'm being honest, the one thing that does bother me with the new multifamily projects that we have been lately seeing is the way every square inch of the site is filled. Because even if I were to live in a complex where there is like almost zero landscaping, how does that provide amenity to your new residents? But it's like an extreme of letting the developer like fully build out his site.
Yeah, but the developer's gonna build something that has landscaping and things like that to attract.
That's the assumption.
wants it
That's the
all.
assumption.
Assumption.
But that assumption hasn't been holding true.
Let me ask you this, do people still live in those apartments?
I don't know.
They have
course
to.
they
I was promised a helipad.
That's where I'm coming from, of course they still live there. So,
And are
I
we
guess that's
providing them
also-
a substandard living
Yes.
they
experience?
choose to live in that substandard living condition. They
Because
chose
they
to
don't
sign
have a
rent
better
there.
option.
The housing stock is such that there's
Which will,
fewer units available than.
As a city, we want to offer them
Yeah,
something
we want to
better, right?
protect that public health, safety, and welfare at the end of the day.
I'm gonna side on the side of business versus the person who chooses to live in that apartment. If you don't want like the amenities, don't live in that apartment. That's what I'm saying, right? I mean, you have the choice to choose where you live. If we're gonna
Within
try
a
to.
limited range, coming from someone who's previously been on food stamps.
ooh, she threw biography at you.
I'm just saying, like, they're,
Like the food stamp card.
Well, no, I'm just, okay, that's a very specific situation you just described. I'm speaking to the person who can afford to live in a brand-new apartment that costs $1,800 a month. They're gonna choose to live there versus going to live in another apartment that costs $1,800 a month, that might be a little bit further out, but have a little bit more green space. That's what I'm getting at. That your situation is different than
Yeah.
the people that I'm targeting.
there is a trade-off between, I agree with you, between like, you're saying that the amenity, our location is an amenity in and of itself by the proximity that we have in Farmers Branch to all the major job zones and that sort of thing. I'm just suggesting, and there's no reason then that we need to provide a substandard living situation for those folks, because from a long-term, like, social sustainability thing, we want to have environments that help our neighbors be neighborly.
What I would
So-
say, then you're now increasing that person's rent because you have less units for the developer to spread their cost around. That's where,
Yeah,
that's
you're
what would be my
getting like
response to
social
that.
engineering, like, again, I have to
So-
agree, trying to make a decision, like, build it because because we think this apartment will be onerous. People are making a choice to go live there, they can do that. But the city still has the right to say, overall, this is how we want the city to be for all the residents. We don't want, you say, we don't want every single lot built at 100% because that affects everybody around there.
cities
But
help.
to say, I would have to agree, say we're looking out for citizens by, I mean, that's the free market. They can choose where they want to live, they don't.
And the same question stands true for the developer, the applicant, don't you see? Because they could have built that same project in a much cheaper cost in any other town than Farmers Branch. If we are holding ourselves to a higher standard, they don't have to come here. But if they're choosing to come, that means there is something we are offering that they are not getting in Dallas, Irving, or Carrollton. Well, in that case, that is the cost of development.
It's a staff, obviously.
So help me, I am remembering something. Didn't we talk about like potentially having a requirement how much green space you had to have per unit or per square
I
foot
remember
or
that
whatever?
discussion.
That is still there.
How does that relate to this conversation?
The 150 square feet per dwelling unit,
Yeah,
that still apply for
right,
new multifamily projects.
okay.
But
And then how would
we're-
that bear on the percentages of the lot
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
thing? Because if we're saying you have to have 150 square feet per person, you're not gonna build a Soviet tenement on 100% of the lot if you have to have 150 square feet of green
Per
space
unit,
per unit.
yes.
So it's not truly going to be this horrible concrete and stone madness if we have that requirement. Is that a requirement? Did that go into effect?
That did go into
Yep.
effect.
Okay, so then perhaps that's the counterbalance to maybe we roll this back to 15 or 10 because we already have a built-in requirement of 150 square feet.
Just for
You're-
multifamily.
Just for
Only for
multifamily.
multifamily, we are
Okay.
talking about non-residential zoning and non-residential projects.
Okay.
But
Wait, I thought we were
multifamily falls
talking,
under
because,
that.
well, he was talking about people living in $1,800 apartments. I thought we were talking about.
We are
multifamily.
talking,
We are
about it,
talking
but they're
about
rolling
that.
it into like the rest of it, so you almost have to separate it out to do what you're talking about.
Additionally, the policy is also a policy.
I will continue to be irrelevant for the next hour. All right, carry on.
No.
No, no.
Additionally, the policy, as you know, is still a policy, and there is only portion of it we can say, okay, it's required. We cannot say all of it is required. So when we are bringing zoning cases, and that only applies for zoning cases, like new multifamily zoning, if it was allowed by right, that policy is almost like well, if you choose to follow, that's good for you. Because if it's a zoning case, then we bring back that recommendation that, okay, they meet most of the policy as stated in the policy document. And that guides our recommendation. However, if it was a detailed site plan, we wouldn't have much teeth based on just that policy because they already have their development rights. What zoning does is it gives us that teeth of actually asking the landscape requirement for every new project, irrespective of whether they require zoning change or not. So that's the difference.
Okay. I still don't,
I think, Gio, I think, like you said, the challenge is that multifamily is in with the rest of the non-commercial development. But
Non-residential.
or, yes, right, the commercial, no, that's non-residential.
I would have a different opinion if it was separated out.
Do you have any issue with the 20% for anything other than multifamily?
Maybe industrial.
The light industrial?
Yeah, I think we've maybe been a little lax on some of those. There's been some of those that I felt like maybe that should be slightly higher.
Well, previously, we only required 5%,
Well,
so.
I'm talking, oh, that's what I'm
Yeah.
referencing, and back to what we've had in the
Yeah.
past. The industrial would probably be okay with that.
So you'd be okay with the 20%
Oh,
within,
Yeah, pretty
with the
much.
industrial?
But I was trying to hope you could walk me through some specific examples, and here's
Okay.
one, right? So that.
So maybe
I
that
get
would
it.
be the homework when we bring this back to commission, because that was one of the homework I have for Kira too, with the lot size and how those numbers really look on paper. Like once you put a building and how much that percentage leaves for
Right,
the
maybe you go back to a
applicant.
couple cases that have been, I don't know, within the last year, something fresh on our memory, we can see, okay, this is what was presented to us, here's what they ended up doing, this is what it would have looked like if we had these requirements.
Right.
Good idea.
Just to put, help me
Yeah.
put it
Yeah, I
into
think- I
context.
think
And
that would-
additionally, another homework I also have for Kira is about that 150 per dwelling unit, because we want to keep it consistent. That way, we are not requiring one thing in the multifamily policy and something different.
Yeah,
In the
that's a
zoning.
great point.
Love that.
That may address my main concern about this, is that where we have the most room for improvement is on the east and west sides, where it's retail and it's light industrial and it's warehouses, all the residential. Again, I don't see a problem with shade tree cover, but where we can get the most, bang out of a change is going from 5% to 20% in all those other areas that are generating the heat island. That's just what I see when I look at the map.
That is true. The other part of the residential picture is in the central area. That's of course not the 20%. That's more the tree requirement. The reason that we are introducing is because there are a lot of lots that are being redeveloped where the houses being demoed and new houses are being built. And that's where having no landscaping requirement in some cases are proving to be detrimental, because the new homeowners or the new property owners are choosing not to put landscaping, and there's some cases replacing mature landscaping or like cutting them down. So this would at least alleviate that situation in the
Is that-
central area.
Is it happening enough where it's really a concern now?
Yes.
Okay.
I think we have our homeworks and bring
Yeah.
this back.
Yeah, I think we have some work to do, and yeah, we can bring it back perhaps with a draft ordinance and some examples to go along with it. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank
and-
you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Kira.
thank you.
All right. Come back to where we are. So that,
She's still in Saudi or whatever?
I was gonna say, does she get to go back to bed?
Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
She's in
Back home?
Azerbaijan,
yeah,
No, I thought it was like 4 a.m. there right now. Right?
probably.
about right.
yes, I believe so.
Yeah.
All right, so that takes us to item A3, discuss agenda items for future planning and zoning commission consideration. Commissioners, do we have items for future discussion?
Did we ever have fencing, a decision on fencing?
Where-
That
Can
came
you
up.
tell me a bit more, like what
At
particularly?
one point, and this is a while ago, but we had discussed fencing materials, what we could use if we wanted, I think we don't have, some people I see in different areas are using different materials than we are. And I don't know that we ever discussed that here in this, but I know that we have discussed, because Gio and I disagreed a little bit, on when one replaces fencing or sections of fence, should it be painted the same color? Should it be stained? Should it be whatever? And I think that we don't have any,
Where'd I fall on that side of the conversation? I forgot.
you didn't want it, you didn't want to have to do it because they may not be able to pay for it. And I said, no way.
I think that section, that is part of our building code, chapter 22, and they have specific requirement for fence material, height, and, the maintenance part of it, like if a section is damaged, how to replace it, that way it looks consistent. That is all under building code, so it's
Okay.
not part of
All
zoning
right.
though.
Okay, got it.
My HOA won't let me use bees.
Bees?
It has to be a living barrier. And they won't, and so I thought, well, I'm just gonna have a
Killer
beehive.
bees might be.
Bees, they're living.
Electric fences and living is.
So I do have an item, I guess. I think I may have brought this up to a couple of you guys, but do we have any kind of, I don't know if ordinance is the right word, but at night, when you're driving down 635 and you're looking south of 635 to all that development that happened behind the boardwalk, those apartments back there. I think maybe it's the JPI property that has the actual nice lighting around the trim of the building. And then the rest of it looks like, just like, I don't know, depressing looking at it. It's just pitch black.
On the apartments or
On the
the?
apartments.
Okay.
So,
So East Branch, Jefferson?
I don't know. I just know that there was the one that's called the Boardwalk. It says Boardwalk. It's got
Uh-huh.
the signs lit and it says Boardwalk. You can see it off the highway. Then you got the other ones that are all the garden style apartments that are back there. Then I drove down D&T the other night on my way home and I saw the new ones that JPI did. Branch East, I think one of them's called over there.
East Branch.
And they had, really nice lighting aesthetics that actually kind of, brought the building to life at night versus just looking at just, darkness. I'm assuming we don't require developers to do anything
On lighting,
on
no.
lighting, on the exterior. Can we?
After it's built, you mean?
No, like now for future. I mean, what's done is done. I'm talking like there's gonna be more apartments. Do we want more of the same, or do we want something to at least look pretty at night?
I think so many have it that we probably haven't even thought about it. Maybe,
Oh, trust me, they don't.
yeah.
Little Russia.
Well, over off of,
they call it over there.
over off of LB.
Little Russia over there.
Over off of the
that's what it
toll
looks
road they
like.
do.
The Soviet style
lighting
apartments
at
we're
Yeah,
talking
it's
about.
institutional housing, it looks like, they're all just stacked up. But there's no lighting back there.
We don't want them over there, actually.
I think the ideal place would have been, if you're mainly concerned about apartments,
I'm thinking about the station area, the new stuff coming up to the station area, because the station area is like, it's primed up to have like.
And there's a
density
lot
there.
coming up. I
so
think we
it's
have.
for, necessarily not for apartments, but any new projects within the station area.
No, I think
talking-
generally speaking, anytime you have a new building, you would want some kind of aesthetic at night, I would think.
So in terms of lighting, we don't have, of course, in zoning, any lighting standards or requirements. We do require, just for pedestrian, of course, we have
Sure,
street
yeah,
light
yeah, street light
requirements.
requirements.
Also, trying to think, on the multifamily security policy, there would be additional lighting requirement, but it's not like aesthetic
And
part
mine's
of it. It's not.
strictly aesthetic, I like what's done on that east side of Farmers Branch, that the buildings look nice at night. I mean, they really do.
They do.
It's a primo area over there.
But we're trying to create that in the station area, right? So what I'm getting at
that'd
is
be
if we're
nice.
gonna put more apartments in the station area, which I'm all for that. I just wanna make sure that we're also creating an environment, inviting environment at night with some of those aesthetics, lighting aesthetics on the actual apartments. And maybe we don't have to make an ordinance, but just talk to the developers as cases come up, but it's just something I notice, and every time I drive by and I look over there, it's just, looks
Pretty
ugly.
bleak,
Yeah.
yeah.
DOT
Noticed.
get permits at Luna behind Quick Trip.
Yeah,
They're
those.
separate than the JPI, so that was
Yeah.
property they sold years ago, so it's a separate deal. than
Right,
Yeah,
right.
because I was thinking
It's
like,
the
we
oldest
don't have any
stuff
new
over
gardens.
there.
It
Yeah.
has more service barn.
Yeah, not the new ones that were recently built by JPI, they sold them too, I
They
think,
did.
but, yeah.
Oh, pink ones or something like that.
Well, those pink ones are,
Asian
those are all
ones, yeah.
from Luna. That's Little Russia back there.
I shouldn't have said it.
I agree.
We'll look into it.
It's just something that I've noticed, and I don't know if other cities have it, because when you go to like, uptown or down, I mean, that's different, right?
I think they don't think about it probably because along LBJ, when you have the East Branch and some of those over there, they look great at night, but they're on an area that people are up and down. Over there, you don't think about it, it's on the back, but that will be open water from people that are viewing that. And so I think that we should address it in some way. It's a great idea.
Just for discussion, you asked.
You can bring that back.
I'd be curious to know if other cities actually have requirements, or if it's just a fact that just the
No, they
developers
do.
put it in there because they do have. I was also at the Star this past weekend, and everything over there is just, I hadn't been over there like at all, and that looks great.
It's fancy.
Yeah.
Holy cow, that's awesome.
And every day there is new announcements. Like the last one was McAfee, the antivirus software. They announced the regional
moving in.
headquarters.
Well, I was there for entertainment and at night, and it was nice.
It was well lit and entertaining.
Yeah, yes, it was.
Perhaps you were watching that game with San Francisco, is that what you?
No, that was Saturday night.
All right. Well, I think that that brings us to the end of our study session. It is presently 7:30, and we will meet downstairs. We have not held to our desires to be on time for the 7 o'clock, but
Somebody gonna yell at us again?
Exciting discussion.
Welcome. It is Monday, January 23rd, 2023, the City of Farmers Branch Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. I'd first like to thank the commissioners for their service this evening. We'll start with citizen comments. This agenda item provides an opportunity for citizens to address the Planning and Zoning Commission on any matter that is not posted on the agenda. Anyone wishing to address the commission should complete a citizen's comments registration form and submit it to the chair prior to the start of the meeting. There's a 3-minute time limit for each citizen to speak, with a reasonable limitation on speakers on one topic or item, with a maximum of 15 total minutes on the same topic item. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. The Planning and Zoning Commission is not permitted to take action on any subject raised by a speaker during citizen comments. However, the Planning and Zoning Commission may have the item placed on a future agenda for action, refer the item to the Director of Planning for further study or action, briefly state existing city policy, or provide a brief statement of factual information in response to the inquiry. We have no citizen comments forms received, so we'll proceed to regular agenda items. We'll begin with item C1. Consider approval of the December 12th, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission minutes and take appropriate action. Commissioners, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the matter? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor? Great, that carries. We'll move to item C2. Consider the request from Lapis 49 LLC and Pavo 786 LLC for final plat approval of Kitty Academy at Mercer Crossing, located at the southeast corner of Valley View Lane and Mercer Parkway, and take appropriate action. Thank you, Chris.
Good evening, Chris Webb, Business Development Specialist, Economic Development and Planning Department, City of Farmers Branch. So the first case before you this evening is going to be for that final plat for the Kitty Academy. This is going to be or consist of 2 lots located at the southeast corner of Valley View and Mercer. And this case did come before y'all as a a detailed site plan a few months ago. Part of the requirements of that was that it be platted prior to vertical construction taking place on this property. So that's what's before you today, is that final plat. As you see, Lot 1 and Lot 2 of this included as part of the overall final plat. And that's just the legal meets and bounds. And here's a zoomed-in view of the overall final plat for this piece of property. As far as the plat itself goes, they've met all state and local subdivision requirements, so no further concerns from staff side, and staff is recommending approval of this final plat as presented.
Great. Commissioners, do we have any questions for staff?
It's fully legally compliant.
Yes.
All right. And any other questions for staff? Is the applicant here to make?
They are right behind me.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the final plat for the Kitty Academy at Mercer Crossing.
All right. A second?
I'll second it.
All right, any comment on the item? All right, seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? All right, that carries. Thank you very much. This will go to, plat
Planning
will
and
not
Zoning
go
Commission is the final.
as the final. Thank you. All right, we will now hear item D1, a public hearing. To conduct a public hearing, consider the request to amend Plan Development District Number 75, which is in PD 75, including but not limited to modifying the development standards for signage on approximately 2.35 acre property located at 14185 Dallas Parkway, and take appropriate action. Thank you again, Chris.
Again, good evening. Chris Webb, Business Development Specialist with the Economic Development and Planning Department. So overall, here's the aerial view of 14185 Dallas Parkway. On site, there is a 15-story office building, as well as an associated parking garage. The real main focus of this isn't going to have much to do with the overall layout of the site or anything like that, but it is going to be concerning roof signage to be located on the office building. As far as the history of this site goes, it is zoned in, it is in PD 75 zoning, and there have been 2 roof signs that have been approved previously in 2011 and 2017 respectively to allow roof signs, and that was through the ZBA process. This process we've since been instructed, I guess, by our city attorneys to not go through the ZBA process, but rather amend the zoning as a whole to address the roof sign issue and request. So the applicant is requesting a zoning amendment to PD 75 to, 1, allow roof signs within the zoning, and 2, create some standards for those roof signs to be allowed within the zoning. Overall, again, as I mentioned, PD 75 the roof signs for this building have gone through 2 ZBA cases. One of those involved a sign on the southern side of this building, which is what you see here. This is currently on the building, and it is allowed based off the ZBA ruling. So there is currently 1 sign. The applicant is proposing a second sign to be located on, this is the south side of the building here. The second sign would be located on the north side. It would be identical in size and location, just the other side of the building. However, they are requesting that up to 4 roof signs be allowed in the future. Whether they want to expand their own signage or if they have another tenant come in, it would allow them the flexibility to add additional roof signage to this building. The current standards simply state that the size, quantity, location, and type of on-premise signs allowed on this building shall be determined by the approved site plan. And really, the overall premise of that is going to be sticking around with the updated zoning amendment, the only exception being the additional language regarding roof signs. And as far as that language goes, the proposed amendments would be that no more than 1 roof sign would be allowed on each side of the building. Each sign cannot exceed 37.5 feet in length or 14.5 feet in height. Roof signs can only be installed on the mechanical equipment screening, and roof signs cannot extend beyond the top edge of that screening. And also, the installation of the roof sign will not require an amendment to the detailed site plan. The reason that we are looking at this and considering it as roof signage, I do want to go back. This area right here, if you can see my mouse, is really the true roof of the building. What you see that sign mounted on is the mechanical equipment screening that's really located on top of the roof. And that's why, because it's located on top of the roof and not really truly considered part of the building, that's why we're having to consider this as roof signs and not, say, a wall sign or something like that. However, any roof sign in the future, including the proposed Copart sign that you see in the bottom right, would be located or would be required to be located on that mechanical equipment screening. As far as the overall comprehensive plan recommendation, the Eastside plan does designate this property as corporate commerce and states that existing office development or high-density office development is really what's supposed to be in this area. There's not real clear direction as far as overall signage or roof signage, but it does state that a distinct signage palette should encourage signs as monument and pedestrian scale attached signage, plus driver scale signage, which this would really be kind of the area that this sign would fall in. And the existing office development is currently consistent with the plan recommendation. We did send out 4 zoning notification letters to adjacent property owners, as well as 2 additional ones to the CFB ISD and Dallas ISD. We have not heard back from anyone regarding this zoning amendment application, and staff is recommending approval of this zoning amendment as it's presented before you. That's it for my presentation, but if you do have any additional questions for staff, feel free to go.
Any questions, commissioners, for staff? All right, seeing none, we will, this is a public meeting, so we will open the public meeting. Anyone wishing to come forward and speak, please do so at the podium. State your name and address for the record. Seeing no one in attendance or coming forward to speak at the public meeting, we will then close the public hearing. And Commissioners, any entertain a motion?
I move to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Second.
All right, any further discussion on the matter? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you all very much.
Real quick, are you concluding the meeting?
I was only gonna mention when this is gonna go to city council.
Sure.
First, I believe this is going to February 21st. Yes.
February
Thank you,
26th.
that's all.
Any other comment?
Commissioners, I just did want to thank you on the record for allowing me to serve with you on this commission. It has been a privilege to come out of the Zoom and in person to be all with you. And I would just ask you, as the only West Sider who seems to come to these meetings, I want to ask you to continue to consider our side of town. Dozens and dozens and dozens of families have moved here to have a quality of life, and there will be dozens more that are moving to the residential, multifamily residentials that are already entitled over there that are seeking a certain quality of life. And we ask you to consider, just don't forget the West Side. Don't forget its participation with the city and the quality of life we're all looking for. So thank you all very much. And I have officially turned in my iPad, so I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your service. With that, that brings us to an adjournment. It is 7:47, and we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much.